Yeah, but we don't have Gail just yet, but she's hoping to join. You didn't hear she wasn't going to join. Yep.
That's the case. Yeah.
Okay, we'll just get going then. Well, welcome everybody. I hope everybody's well. And I'd just like to, as I usually do at the start of the Angus IJB meetings, extend our thanks and our appreciation to all of the HSCP staff and our partners who are continuing to work in very challenging conditions due to the COVID pandemic, but actually most recently throughout the two storms that have caused a lot of disruption across Angus and put a lot of extra pressure onto all of the services. Just to advise you that we're going to have a break within the meeting today, probably after agenda item 6, just for 10 minutes, just a comfort break. And I'd also like to advise that item 10 on the agenda, the Forensic Medical Services agenda item, is withdrawn. Have we got any apologies, Karen?
Chair, apologies to Catherine Lindsay. Catherine Lindsay is substituted by Peter MacDonald today, and also Emma Fletcher.
That's great, thank you. And moving now to any declarations of interest. Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Chair. Just my usual one. As a non-executive director of Public Health Scotland, we'll have a specific exemption, so I would stay in and contribute. Thank you for anything that's relevant.
Okay, thank you. We'll make a note of that. Any other declarations of interest? No. Okay. So moving on to item 3 on the agenda, which are the minutes and action log. And first of all, we have the minute from the previous meeting, which was the IJB meeting on the 27th of October. Do we have any comments or queries on that minute? No. Well, thanks very much to Karen for that minute, and we're happy to approve that as a true record of that meeting. Moving now to... Oh, that was that an agreement, Councillor Miles? Yes?
Yes, that's all right.
That's great. Moving on now to the action log. I don't know if we've got Gail in the meeting just now, who might want to say a few words.
Yes,
we are, right, you're in the background there. Hello, Gail.
Hello.
I don't know if you want to say a few words in terms of the action points update.
Yes, I will do. The majority of them are complete and on target. So I would just like to draw your attention to page 14 and the one dated the 14th of December. And that's the mental health and wellbeing strategy draft. The revised timeline set out in the mental health report is now for April 22 on that. And then the others, item 8, Angus IJB Strategic Financial Plan. Apologies, that is also overdue, and the explanation there is around COVID, and the constraint is still ongoing. But this issue will be revisited once capacity allows, and we've scheduled that also for April 22. And then the last one, number 4, is to refine the assumptions and responses regarding investment in preventative approaches and demand management, and that's expected to be back with the IJB in February 2022.
That's great, thanks very much. Is there any questions on those that update? Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it was just on the mental health update, and it says in the action log that the full financial framework is not yet developed. Obviously, I think it's about a year exactly that we raised its absence as an issue. Has it been started? Does anyone know? Thanks.
Gail, do you want to take that one, or Sandy?
Sandy, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Bell. So there's a bit more detail about this in section on page 49 in the mental health report, and it just kind of sets out where we are. So this is not an Angus plan. This is a Tayside plan, a Tayside financial plan, and Councillor Bell, like a number of things that we've spoken about today, when you're relying on a network of things to happen, it sometimes can be quite difficult for those to come together. So we're not able to make this happen of our own accord. We are dependent on various partners. There have been some initial discussions, or there have been discussions between NHS Tayside finance people and chief finance officers. We all, as chief finance officers, we're all involved in slightly different things at a regional level. This is not one I'm actively involved in, but is one where I contribute to the overall discussions. So there has been discussions about what needs to go into the plan, and there are a variety of ways of building these plans up. And I think there's still at the point of working out how best to bring all these things together. Without a doubt, the events of the last, in the last 12 months have inhibited the likes of finance capacity to kind of come together to deliver some things, and this is one of those. But I'm not particularly aware it's undermining specific actions, because specific actions will have their own plans associated with them. And we might see a bit more of that when we come to the mental health item on the agenda.
Okay, thanks for that, Sandy. You happy with that, Councillor Bell?
Well, I mean, the page 49 section doesn't specifically say the work's been started, but I hear what Sandy's saying, and as long as it's not hindering other developments, although obviously it hindered our ability to approve the strategy due to its absence. But thank you. I look forward to seeing more on that.
Okay, so are we happy then to note the action log? So moving on now to this is the minute of the audit committee, and this is for noting. Are we all happy to note that minute? Yep. And then the minute of the special meeting that was held on the 12th of November. Do we have any comments, and are we happy to approve this minute as an accurate record? Yes, we'll take that as approval. Thank you very much. Okay, so we move on now to item 4, which is the finance report, and I'll hand over to Sandy for that one. Thanks, Sandy.
Thanks, Chair. I maybe just could go back to that item about the mental health plans not inhibiting development. I think I'd have to caveat it by saying is not as far as I am aware, rather than that being a position as a given. But not as far as I'm aware. Anyway, thanks, Chair. So item 4 on the agenda is the regular finance report. Chair, if it's okay, there are a few points I'd just like to highlight in this, and I will try and keep it brief, but just to draw people's attention to them in terms of things that people can take away. And I'll refer to these by the sections in the report. So the first point I'd just like to highlight is section 3.4, where we talk about prescribing. And the only reason for highlighting this is because it links to a paper further down our agenda, and you can see the kind of issues that we're describing in the finance paper, in the prescribing paper later, and how they are correlating with what we're setting out regarding the finance position. And that is that just some of our costs are running slightly above the patterns that we've seen in previous periods. So we're just trying to keep an eye on that, and as I say, that ties back to the prescribing paper later on. The next one I'd just like to highlight again. It's not. It's more just so everybody's kind of realising and clocking this. There's a section 3.10 on page 26 described as centrally managed budgets, and I just want to draw people's attention to that because this is a change in the way we present information rather than anything substantial in the partnership. It's the first time we've changed the way we present information for a number of years, but we think it helps clarify the kind of integrated nature of the partnership and is probably better for board members in terms of how they would interpret information. The next one I'd like to flag up is section 3.13 or 313, mainly on page 28. We've included this paragraph a number of times, this section a number of times. It highlights our progress with savings plans. It ties in with other updates in the IJB papers generally. But what, of course, it does do in terms of thinking about our financial planning, it does highlight that in terms of recurring savings delivery, not quite the bottom bold line, but the second bottom bold line, we are behind where we would hope to be in terms of recurring savings delivery. That is of itself not necessarily a surprise because we could put that down to timing. But of course, when timing gets mixed up with delivery at some point we start to have a different type of issue. So we know lots of things have been delayed in terms of timing, and we've just got to keep an eye on the difference between a timing delay and the ability to deliver full stop. So I think it's important to highlight that one as well. Sorry, Chair, I know we're meant to keep these comments brief, but I think some of these are worth highlighting. The next one is section 3.14. It's a follow-on section from something that members saw in the October report. In the October report, we just got kind of information and updates coming out from the Scottish Government about new funding being allocated to partnerships and particularly to support the social care efforts. This section in section 3.14 gives more up-to-date information about where we are with that process of mobilising the funding. It's worth keeping in mind that the Scottish Government were pretty prescriptive about how this funding would be allocated. And at our last meeting, I've got to kind of put the line that we agreed in. We did agree that we would devolve to the Chief Officer the ability to progress these plans in line with the Scottish Government's intention and in line with our own strategic plan. And that's what we're now proceeding to do. A wee bit further on, I'd just like to also draw our attention to section 3.15 on page 29 and 30. By way of background, historically, we have brought a financial planning update to a December IJB with the intention of finalising a financial plan in April. There are a number of capacity-related issues, but also because of a bit of uncertainty in the system, for example, regarding item 3.14, we haven't been able to bring together a draft financial plan for the December IJB meeting. We do still have a February IJB board meeting. We plan to bring a draft financial plan to the February IJB board meeting and still deliver to this group for approval, hopefully a final financial plan in April. So we'll still meet the end point, but we're just putting the initial paper back from December to February, just for a variety of reasons, including capacity and things like the uncertainty associated with the new funding coming in. But on page 30 of this report, within that section 3.15, it does highlight the risk that we are exposed to regarding existing plans. So we have existing plans cumulatively to deliver by 23-24 almost £4 million worth of recurring savings. And if you kind of really risk assess that, there is a possibility you might think, well, we might not be able to deliver that. We might only be able to deliver a proportion of that. And we've set that out here. So there is quite a significant exposure to the IJB to plans that have not yet delivered yet. Those plans still remain on the table, but as I say, they haven't delivered yet. And that ties back to my reference to timing above. And finally, Chair, just highlight Appendix 3, where we regularly include an update about our reserves. The IJB does have significant reserves. It is absolutely not unique in Scotland in that regard. I may have said at this committee before, but we do expect the Scottish Government to put out a note to just update boards and auditors about the government's own expectation regarding IJB reserves. So we'll probably see that come out at some point in the next few months. Thank you, Chair. That's all I want to say. But I just thought it was important to highlight those comments, and happy to take any questions.
Do we have questions, comments for Sandy? No. I just had one, Sandy, with regard to, I think it's under the winter planning section that an amount has been allocated from the government for staff wellbeing. I just wondered if you or perhaps somebody else on the call could provide a bit more information about that. Is it a substantial amount, and how will that be allocated? Is it going to be equally across the Health and Social Care Partnership?
Okay, so the reason I haven't included a figure there, Chair, is that the allocation for that has come in dribs and drabs, whereas the other four items have all come in as big allocations. One reason it's come in as bits and pieces is some of the money has been allocated directly to NHS Tayside to support wellbeing for NHS Tayside employees. Separately, the partnership has been allocated, so that's gone to NHS Tayside, and we've managed through that channel. Separately, the partnership has received funding to deal with the likes of wellbeing issues in our primary care sector, within our social care employed sector, and also within the independent sector for people who are working in that sector but aren't directly employed by the partnership. So through a variety of management groups, Dr. Clement is linking in with a group of primary care representatives to support primary care with wellbeing issues. George Bowie and his management team are working in their own services to allocate that. And in conjunction with Ivan Cornford, George is also liaising with Ivan to allocate funds to support the independent sector. So we've got an element of coverage. In terms of the funding, I'm not sure, but I have a feeling it's less than £50,000. I can't remember the exact figure, but let's say less than £50,000 unless I have to correct myself later.
Okay. Thanks very much. That was very helpful. Peter.
Thank you, Chair. Sandy, you attract very few questions because your reports are always very comprehensive and not flagging anything to worry about. But I've got a small peripheral question. There are a few references to demographics. And yet, in the round, the population in Angus has been going down successfully in 6 years. What is it particularly within the demographics that causes you any alarm?
Okay, yeah, thanks. That's a good question. There was a report. I think it went to the December IJB meeting last year, where we highlighted the demographic pressures. And what we were really looking at there was that and I can't remember the age cohorts, but the over 70s or the over 80s or the over 85s who use, of course, proportionally more and more services, particularly, for example, care at home services. Those populations were continuing to grow. And I obviously can't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but some cohorts of that were growing quite disproportionately. Obviously, you're right, the population of Angus is not growing as such, but those components of the population were growing quite significantly. And I'm not talking about growing at 1%. Some of them were growing at, forgive me, but just for the sake of it, an example, let's say at 3% in 1 year in one cohort. And that was having a disproportionate effect on our plans for delivering, let's say, older people services. But perhaps George might want to comment here. Beyond that older people sector, there are other parts of our client group that also grow in terms of, for example, disability. So it's not linked necessarily to the population level itself, but the cohorts of the populations inside the population. And George might want to comment on either of those points a bit more.
George?
That's fine, Chair, thank you. Yes, Sandy, that's a good summary. Just a little bit more detail. At our over 85s, we have, in proportion to our general population, a higher number of over 85s in many other authority areas in Scotland. We don't know why that is, but that is a fact. And our over 85s, who are the greatest consumers of our older people's services, have grown at a terrific rate. I can't put a number against that. And I do know that our predictions for that growth have it's happened much quicker than we thought it would, and much more quickly. There's probably a COVID factor in that, but we don't know exactly what that is. So the kind of surge in growth that has led to a great increase in demand for care at home, we weren't really anticipating that. We were into 2023, and that's happened a lot more quickly. The other things are, and it's a good thing, folk with learning disability are living longer. We have more folk with learning disability in our services now, and their carers are getting older and often less able to cope, so need more support. And finally, I would say diagnosis of autism is it's a big issue for us. That's emerging in all our learning disability reviews. That will have been reported to the IGB before. We have another report coming in February. So we have people who have autism and learning disability. I think they're quite well catered for in our services, but we also have people who are, I suppose you would say, quite high functioning with autism, but need periodic support at a lower level, but there are quite high numbers, and we're looking in various work streams at improving the services there. So there are a number of areas of work where we're just experiencing demographic change, most of which we were sighted on and able to predict, but some of which has happened a lot quicker than we thought. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, George. Ivan.
I suppose the only other demographic thing to point out would be that the workforce isn't growing exponentially within the age groups of the working population to meet those needs as well. So it's at both ends that's a pressure.
That's great. Thanks for that. Thanks for that question, Peter. So if we have no further questions, if we just move to the recommendations, which are around noting the financial position, the risk assessment, the update regarding reserves, and the issues that are documented in Appendix 4 regarding financial governance. Are we happy to note those? Yep. Okay, thanks very much, and thank you, Sandy. So move on to item 5 now, which is the strategic planning progress update. And I'll hand over to you, George, for this one.
Thank you, Chair. Members should be quite familiar with this report. I submit it every second IJB. Our purpose is to report on the whole range of change programmes that are happening under the broad umbrella of the Angus care model. It is worth saying that COVID is still having a bit of an impact on services. Some live issues still around care homes and care at home, although not in the kind of highly concerning way that was happening a year ago. And some lingering long-term impacts on our business, whether that's to do with staff absences or just changes to the way that we do our work. Levels of business, I would probably say that I'm in my 40th year of this line of work. I can't remember it being so busy for staff, and I think that's about recovery, increased levels of demand, but I also think that we're dealing with that with quite a fatigued workforce as well. So there's a lot going on, and we're beginning to see the impact of that in staff absences and so on. I think people are feeling a lot of pressure. Anyway, I'll move on to the content of the report. Now, I'm not going to talk to every single section, and it would be here all day, but I'll just pick things out that I think are important. I'm happy to take questions at the end. So strategic planning group, we always cover that at the start of the report. The integration scheme work is still going on, and our plan is to have a draft of the new integration scheme, or the revised one, for consultation at the February 2022 meeting. Members will recall that it was agreed to extend the strategic plan to March 2023 as per the Scottish Government's permissions, and work is ongoing on the new plan. In the new year, public consultation will begin, and we'll be looking to have approval for the plan early in 2023 at the latest. We're progressing the early intervention and prevention work. Alison Clement brought a really helpful report to Strategic Planning Group on the 1st of October, outlining a number of activities that we wanted to get underway in early intervention and prevention work, and that combined with the alliance we've entered into with Angus Alive and Angus Council on Wellbeing for All are beginning to get a bit of movement, but we've much work still to do. I'm pleased about that as the chair of the SPG, because it was our one outstanding area of work from our strategic plan that we hadn't really managed to get going, partly because of COVID delaying so many things. Our work on our workforce plan continues. This is for the Health and Social Care Partnership Plan. We would hope to be able to bring a draft to the February IGB, and we need to have our plan submitted to the Scottish Government by the 31st of March. So that's all work that's ongoing. So in the long list of change programmes, the physical disability and learning disability ones are both due to come to the February meeting, so I'll just skim across that. There's quite a lot about care homes. The board will be aware of the consultation on internal care homes, on the options appraisal, on the issue of movement of resource into care at home and early intervention. That consultation is well underway. There's been a lot of activity on that in the last couple of weeks, and that will conclude on the 7th of January. We might want to have a discussion at the end, Chair, of this report about whether a special meeting would be beneficial at the end of January. I'm conscious that the process would be that we work up the conclusions of the consultation, bring a report to IJB. We don't really want to have that lingering on till well into February. I think that would be pretty tough on people that have been involved in the engagement process and are waiting for the outcomes. So I wondered if we might be able to look at a special meeting at maybe the last week of January, something like that, save us about a month. Okay, yeah, there's a brief issue in there about the changes to the meal provision at Seaton Grove and that coming from Kinloch. Okay, we've been very closely monitoring that, and that is due to be implemented. And you'll see in there also discussions about the mental health unit at Seaton Grove. There's a review of projected needs, if you like, 3 years into the future. And I've asked for that work to be concluded and a decision made next week about that, because it's lingering on a bit and we need to come to a view. The work on nursing provision in care homes, that programme was pretty significantly derailed by COVID, and I think we'd be fair to say has struggled to gain momentum. I think it would be helpful to have a separate report into the IJB maybe in February about that. Chair, I haven't put it in the recommendations. It was more after I'd written the report I was thinking about that, really looking at the proposed model of delivery. There is a wee bit of a risk that we leave it and wait and see what happens with the National Care Service review, but I think the need is a bit more urgent than that. I should say, however, though, I think there have been significant improvements in clinical care for residents in care homes post-pandemic, and that's really welcomed. There have been great improvements in that regard. The psychiatry of old age care home work is just progressing as noted in the report. Next, I should mention the daycare review. We had our second meeting this week with the daycare providers, and we discussed a project initiation document. We're taking a project approach to the way forward. That was all agreed with the managers and board members, and we looked specifically at governance, how we undertake a broader engagement, for example, with service users. Daycare providers have been good at doing that during COVID, and identifying the work streams that the project would take forward. I would say that daycare is a really important part of our maintaining people at home in the community. And we're conscious, as I've said in previous reports, that there are some challenges in there about the type of model, the different types of needs that are met in daycare. The financial model probably isn't right, and we need to try and fix that. They're identifying to us, daycare providers, challenges about increased need from their service users, just as we're seeing in care at home and residential care. So that's going to be a really interesting piece of work, and I'm feeling optimistic about it. Supported housing in Provost Johnson Road and St Drossens is the next one. To be honest, I don't think we covered ourselves in glory with our initial consultation and engagement work with residents and their families there. So we've put a pause on that work while we carry out a much more thorough engagement and consultation piece of work. So that's just kicking off. Care management review, I won't linger on that. It's pretty technical. We've only outlined some bits that are going on. It's probably better that I bring including in a future report of this sort, a bit more detail next time around. Jill, I wondered if you want to come in and address the next cluster. They're more in your bailiwick than mine. I'm quite happy to talk to them, but if you would prefer, you've probably got a bit more detail. Jill, can you hear me? No, you can't hear me. Obviously something's gone wrong there, so I'll talk to them. 2 seconds and I'll go back into the tap to my mouse. Okay, the homeless supported accommodation review is underway. It's part of the rapid rehousing review in Angus. We're important partners in that work. Need to review homeless support, particularly for young people and vulnerable categories of people, has been highlighted in some of our ICRs, initial case reviews, in the Adult Protection Committee. There are other drivers as well as that, but that is an important one for us. Yeah, there's been an agreement about the methodology with stakeholders, number of key actions completed to date, and there's a consultation and engagement process going on with the small number of people between 40 and 70 who have complex needs requiring the type of targeted support that they're seeking to improve. The end of that engagement process is the 31st of January. The next one, you received a full report on the stroke rehab pathway, and in this section at 3.10 it basically provides an update on the project work that is going on. You can see the work streams there with some timescales further on. The MFE, Medicine for the Elderly Inpatient Review, work's progressing to review the inpatient model for medicine for the elderly. It's worth highlighting there that bed occupancy has really increased in White Hills and Arbroath Infirmary in particular, and we think that will continue due to winter pressures. I've got to say that the occupancy rate there is high. We are hoping to make an impact on that with our intermediate care increased provision through the winter planning monies that Sandy spoke about. The urgent care review, working closely with national and regional colleagues on the redesign of urgent care. You can see the phased work. So urgent care in the community has commenced in the autumn of this year. The financial implications, the only thing I've highlighted there really is a number of the saving proposals or projects are at risk of non-delivery or partial delivery, would be a better way to put it, because of COVID and the delayed progress on a number of the projects. I think also capacity of managers to undertake the work that is required, because they're often dealing with increased service demand. And I've identified in there a number of risks. I'll quickly go through them. The disruption caused by a further COVID outbreak, if things were to go back, God forbid, to how they were, say, last February, we would be devoting a lot of energy to that again, and it would lead to delays to the planned work. The capacity issue I've highlighted there. We've got some big ticket things happening. There are inspections coming in adult protection that will take up a lot of people's time. So just as a general capacity issue for some of our targets. Number C is the one I've earlier mentioned. Corporate services lacking capacity to support the programmes, in particular procurement, finance and HR. I know Sandy's finance section is a bit depleted by movement of staff into new jobs, often promotions, so that's a good thing, but it's leaving us a bit thin. We're a bit more optimistic about procurement. The council's procurement section has hired a number of new staff, so that is beginning to feel a bit more resilient, but we're very dependent on those services to help our programmes. Shortages in the availability of care at home affecting a number of the programmes adversely. That is very true. That is a pressing issue for us just now. Board members probably saw the Courier, was that last Friday, where our letter we'd written out to service users about the challenges around personal care provision and explaining those and what we were trying to do about it was in the press. And it is a really pressing issue, and is taking up a lot of time and probably diverting capacity away from the projects. And the other issue is, of course, the staff shortages caused by recruitment and retention issues. So a number of risks in there. We're working with those as best we can at the moment, and there are no directions required. This is pretty well our own business within the IJB. Thanks, Chair. I'm happy to take questions.
Okay, well, thanks very much, George. Thanks for that very comprehensive report. You know, it's clear to see the huge amount of work that's happening in terms of the detail that's provided in this report. I see Councillor Bell and Peter Burke. So, Councillor Bell, do you want to come in first?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, George. I mean, these reports are always really helpful in terms of letting us see the range of work that is going on over and above the high-profile COVID work, and I really appreciate the issues around capacity that we discussed quite a lot at Audit this morning, and we were also discussing the strategic planning, and I just wanted to take a little step back a wee bit. Our internal auditor had raised the fact that South Lanarkshire had brought in Public Health Scotland to do a health needs assessment, which had been found to be very helpful. And in light of the comments that you were making about the demographic changes, you know, the speed at which these have happened, slightly unexpectedly in a way, and for me as well, around the deepening inequalities that have been exacerbated by COVID. When would our next kind of regular health needs assessment be due? Is it worth considering bringing in, you know, PHS to help us to take a bit of time to do something like that, to reflect around where we need to go on a strategic basis to support that strategic planning work, because, you know, those demographic pressures won't be going away, but I just wondered if that might be a helpful approach to help us recalibrate where we're going on a strategic basis. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, Julie, I think the initial strategic plan in the early days of integration, we were able to identify pretty good data on demographic growth and thought what we had were pretty resilient projections. Vivian did a lot of work on that and through the LIGs as well. So we were able to do it by locality. You're right. I think we should revisit that. I haven't seen the South Lanarkshire report. I'll get a look at that. But I think you're right. There is a need for us to more scientifically think about, or to have a more scientific explanation for the one I tried to give to Peter earlier, to get some more figures against that. I know Vivian would have views about that. As she authors our strategic plan that was heavily involved the first time round. But I don't know if she's on the call today. I'll take. Do you mind if I take that away, Julian, and give it a bit of thought? But I think it's a good shout. We are needing to possibly get some support with that, so we can have a look.
That'd be good. PHS is looking to help the wider system, and I'm happy to chat to you offline a bit more about what might be coming down the line.
Okay, thank you.
That's great. Thanks, Councillor Bell. That's a very helpful suggestion. Peter Burke.
Yeah, thanks, George. Another brilliant report. It's good to see everybody's keeping busy. If we come back to 3.4 to the care homes review, I asked a question this morning in the audit which couldn't be answered, but it's your question. Do we have any formal way of stress testing external care home providers? And if we don't, should we have? I know you say you monitor them weekly. Is it just a sort of warm feeling, or is there a formal routine that you go through, and should we have one?
Sorry, I'm on mute. Yeah, we do have a care home operational group that meets weekly. It's probably somewhere in between the two things, Peter. It's a bit more than a warm feeling because we've got a lot of expertise and knowledge and a high level of contact with the providers. We link back into the providers forum. We have the type of relationship with the care homes where people will flag up for us if they're getting into difficulties. Ivan's key in that, in his relationship with the providers. We're able to attend the providers forum whenever we need to do so. We also carry out joint assurance visits to the care homes. They originally were very much about COVID, but they've become a bit more broad-based than that, and they're carried out in combination of care management, Department of Public Health, infection control and district nursing. So we get a pretty good sense of what's happening, and obviously the care inspectorate are members of our care home group as well. Provider failure is one of our risk assessment and risk management charts, if you like, tables that get submitted to the clinical care group. So I couldn't say hand on heart that I thought, say, care home X was 8 out of 10 resilient and care home Y was 7 out of 10 resilient, and that's something that could change pretty rapidly. So I don't know that it would give us that much value. Plus, it would be an absolutely massive exercise to try and do that. So we're somewhere in the middle of a scientific model and the warm feeling, but I think it's quite rigorous. I don't know if anybody else wants to come in on that, because that's very much a team effort. Wonder if Ivan might want to comment on it.
I think there's a lot of people with oversight at the moment of care homes, and I think it's been brought closer into the partnership than it was, say, 2 or 3 years ago. There are still some groups who aren't as involved as others, and Vivian will attest to that in different ways as well. And I think people flag up issues a lot easier and talk about things, Peter. And there are always different stresses that come through. So for example, this new pay uplift that the care staff are getting, that's caused some consternations because of the request from Scottish Government that we pay the money out and then we might get the funding sometime before February to pay for that. In Angus, that's not the case, because Angus are onto that and the payments seem to be going through quicker. But it's those sorts of things that will add stress. But I think George and Sandy and others are known about them because they hear me blathering on about them weekly to them. So they know that, and all the providers will come via me if they've got any issues.
Good.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
I'll add one other thing, Peter, that would be useful. Thanks, Ivan. We do a survey of the care homes very frequently, and the results are fed into the care home operational group. And that's a good barometer of how things are going. And Kirsty Duncan, who does that work, brings a regular report summarising the themes with lots of good stats and analysis that come back from the survey. It's self-reporting, but it does give us a chance to interrogate that. And when people start to slip on the returns, we chase them up. With the last resort is me sending a stroppy letter to say that you're not submitting your returns, which actually works, funnily enough. But so that gives us a bit of a statistical basis for our thinking as well. We can see patterns in that.
Right. Good. Okay. Yeah. Thanks both. Yeah.
Okay. And Alison?
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to highlight that Emma Fletcher is our Director of Public Health, who is a member of the IJB. I see that she's not here today, but has indicated she would like to join the Strategic Planning Group and be a member within Clinical Partnership Group. So hopefully if we can strengthen the links, and Emma is very keen to be involved, it's just with competing priorities related to COVID, it has been quite difficult, but she's met with both Gail and I, and hopefully if we can strengthen that link with public health within the partnership, and then once she gets a feel for it, we'll be able to indicate what support might be available for that from that department to inform what we're doing. I'm really keen that we get the evidence behind anything that we're proposing. So a lot of our early prevention work, it's key for me that we have the expertise and that we make decisions based on best evidence of what's worked in other areas. You know, George, really keen to see the work in Lanarkshire as well, and really learn from other areas. That's possibly something that we don't do enough of, knowing what works, and hopefully Emma and her team can help us with that. Thank you.
That's very helpful, Alison. Thank you. And I think that's good news to hear in terms of those links with Emma Fletcher. If we don't have any more questions, George, you'd mentioned whenever you were speaking about the possibility of a special IJB in January, and members have been alerted to this previously whenever we considered that item at the special meeting. I certainly would be happy to progress with that on the basis that it will help expedite the overall piece of work. Are other IJB members happy with that? Yep, I can see a few nods.
Yes.
And was there something else that you'd spoken about whenever you were?
Yes, it was the nursing provision in care homes.
Yep.
I did suggest that we should bring a standalone report on that to future IJB.
Okay. So we can. The recommendation is to note this paper, but we can add in that that paper will come to a future IJB. Okay. Thanks very much, George. So we'll move on now to item 6, which is the mental health and wellbeing update. And I think we have Jill here.
I am. Apologies, George. Out just as you were asking me to come in on your report, so thank you for covering that. Apologies.
I just thought it was all accurate, Jill.
You did a fantastic job. Thank you, Chair. I think I'm wanting to start on a really positive note around mental health, if that's okay. Mental health over the last kind of 12 months and more has been quite a significant challenge or area of challenge within Tayside. But I did note in the October report that we were beginning to see a bit of kind of movement around the relationships, etc. And I just wanted to give the IJB assurance that that is really progressing and moving in a really positive way. And I'm really heartened to see that. So there's lots of new relationships developing. It genuinely feels that we've got a whole system response and that we're very much working together within mental health. And that's been around building some of those connections, building the trust between people and actually getting an understanding of what's happening in each other's part of the system and working out how we can work together to develop and inform the solutions, and I include service users and carers in that when I say working together. So I just wanted to start off with that because I think it has been a really challenging time, but I genuinely see that things are moving in the right direction with mental health. So the report you've got is quite a detailed report again and builds on some of the information that we brought back in the October report. I just want to draw your attention to a couple of things within the current position, particularly around the enhanced community support service. We did say that we would bring some of the data back around that, and I think what you'll see from the data is that it's been a really well received service, and it's actually been extremely positive for staff and patients. And a lot of the comments from staff and particularly the GP referrers are actually very supportive around that. We have included what the next steps for ECS for mental health is going to be in the next few months, and working closely with Alison and George in terms of that, kind of bringing it together with a physical healthcare side of things from an integrated community support. So that's actually a really exciting piece of work and good opportunities going forward. Just in terms of the DBI, again, that's progressed since the last IJB report, and we are looking to be operational early next year with that service. An update this time in terms of the Tayside mental health, wellbeing, living life well strategy or direction of travel, acknowledging that we don't have the financial framework to support that. But just going back to Sandy's point and Councillor Bell, your question, it isn't stopping us getting on with the work, so to speak. So what we've done, I know that we had initially agreed to bring back our draft strategy, but as I say, or as Gail picked up in the action points, we are asking to defer that to next year, and that is mainly around the work that we want to do around the engagement and under the new Public Bodies Act, which Sally has an in-depth knowledge of, we are having to do an extended period of planning and engagement, and that is going to continue till April next year, which is why we felt it would be inappropriate for us to bring back a draft strategy without going through the appropriate engagement channels. However, what we did want to demonstrate is the direction of travel that we're going in within Angus, and that is detailed in the papers. The working groups that are set up across Tayside around primary care, mental health, integrated substance misuse and mental health, learning disabilities, for example, they're all moving and they're all progressing. I know George is involved in the LD work and the transitions. Alison's been involved from a primary and community mental health perspective, and we've now got our lead GP for mental health in post as of the 1st of December, so that's really exciting and gives us a really good opportunity to improve that working within primary care and mental health. We've also included the Listen, Learn, Change update, and I think just going back to my opening remarks around the way that we're now working, the Listen, Learn, Change action plan, there's been weekly meetings ongoing for a while, but in the last kind of 6 weeks, the partnerships have now been asked to join that meeting and contribute to the review of the evidence that's been provided in relation to the recommendations from Listen, Learn, Change. So it does feel like it's a much more whole system approach and review, and we've got to a point where we've got a really good environment where we can be each other's critical friend around that evidence and put a bit of constructive challenge in the system, so that we're all getting that level of assurance that actually, yes, that evidence does define where we are in relation to each of the recommendations. Sandy's mentioned the financial plan. The risks in the paper aren't much different to what we had detailed in the last progress report. We do have some challenges continuing around mental health delays, and we're currently working across the system, including with social care side of the house, to see how we can accelerate some of those care packages for those where it is safe to do so. But it is fair to say that a number of those delays are quite complex, patients needing quite specialist facilities as well as guardianship. So I'm just going to, if it's okay, Chair, invite Sally to come in around the comms and engagement plan, which we have shared with the papers. We felt it was important that we share the actual plan around the engagement with IJB members, so that you're aware of what we are aiming to do between now and the end of April. So Sally, I'll just hand over to yourself.
Thank you very much. Yeah, just to say that this is an evolving communication and engagement plan, and it obviously builds on, or is based upon, the communication and engagement plan and principles that the IJB approved last year. So we do need to obviously make sure that we have our stakeholder mapping done as effectively as can be, and we are working very closely with the Angus Mental Health and Wellbeing Network as we develop our communication and engagement plan. So I'm not going to go through all of the actions, but you'll be able to see them for yourselves. But just highlighting or to reassure you that we have got plans in place, and we are being as rigorous as, or we will be as rigorous as we possibly can be, with all the restrictions that are still around, to make sure that we can engage with people, or as many people as we possibly can. But I shared this with the Angus Mental Health and Wellbeing Network, I think it was last week or the week before, and it was well received. But as I just want to stress again, there will be many more actions that we will add to this, and we will work closely with NHS Tayside as we engage with people in Angus.
Thank you, Sally. Chair, if it's okay, I know Terry's on the call as well, who may want to add anything to the information that I've provided from the report. So just to acknowledge the work that Terry's put into a lot of the work in mental health as well. So Terry, if there's anything that you want to specifically pull out of the report.
I think you've represented us very well, and I hope it's evident the amount of work that's been going on both locally and across Tayside just to really improve the pathways for people with mental health needs within Angus. We've done a lot of prevention and self-management work, but we're now looking at more specialist support within CMHTs and how there's no wrong door so that people can easily access support. And I think that the ECS model really highlights the way that we're going and how we want to move forward. And you can see from the feedback that everyone involved has really felt, including service users, GPs, referrers, folk involved with it, that it's just the way we need to move forward to improve access and ensure that people are getting joined up support from different services rather than being silos with gaps between it. So I'm really pleased, just to report that things are going well and happy to answer your questions.
Thanks, Terry.
Okay, thanks very much. Gail, do you want to come in and see your hands up just before we take any questions?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I would also like to Bill's introduction. I think we have moved very, very swiftly over the last few months with our improvements regarding mental health. A bit disappointing when we found out that service users hadn't completed their survey. Hayley Mearns, I don't know if Hayley's still on the call, but Hayley is also going to support us through VAA of trying to get our reach and extend our reach with putting information on their website as well, because clearly we're not getting there yet when we've got a small number of returns. So our stakeholder engagement really needs to be strengthened and make sure that we are reaching the right people, but we're all aware that that's an area of improvement for us. And as I say, Sally's addressing that through the communication and engagement plan that they've shared today. So we're not being held up by any of the challenges that are coming from across Tayside. So it's providing that assurance to you all. And the Tayside executive partners continue to meet. And there is a scrutiny team in Tayside at the moment scrutinising the work that is going on. So just by way of assurance, we'll keep you abreast of any developments from there as well.
That's great. Thanks very much, Gail. And thanks very much for the report. Very comprehensive, a lot of really useful and information for us in there. That the feedback in terms of the enhanced community support is really good to see some of those figures as well and some of that evidence. Also, really good to see that comms and engagement plan. We hadn't been expecting that to come, so it's really good that it's there. Gives us more of a taste of the way that this is going to be approached. In terms of that plan, all of the principles that are set out just seem really sensible, absolutely. In terms of some of the detail, Sally, you'd said that it is going to be worked up more. I just wondered if you could tell us a little bit about what's new in terms of the consultation plans. Gail's talked a bit about working with BAA. How are we planning to get to the hard to reach groups? Have we considered sort of methods like using our frontline staff to perhaps undertake some informal feedback work? Less formal ways of collecting that feedback. Just, I guess, what's different if we want to gain more of this information, what could we do differently to enable that to happen?
Yeah, I think one of our major assets is the Mental Health and Wellbeing Network, and they can reach into lots of different areas of service users who have lived experience of mental health. We'll work really closely with Angus carers as well as Voluntary Action Angus and a lot of the third sector and independent organisations. So I don't know whether there'll be anything totally new. We'll just improve what we know works. But the challenge is that we have the limitations of COVID and limitations of face-to-face interactions. But as you quite rightly say, Chair, we will use or build upon the expertise of people who see people with living with mental health conditions every day. And for example, the social prescribers, our community mental health teams, and we'll ask them to bring this to their attention. But we know it's really difficult to get feedback sometimes, but we will do everything we can to raise awareness that this is an opportunity for them to have their voice heard and listened to.
Thanks very much. And just finally on the recommendations, the final recommendation is requesting an update report be brought back to April. Will that have the draft implementation plan at that stage? You obviously mentioned there's this period of consultation that's going to happen. So will it just be an update that comes to the April IJB?
I think, thank you, Chair. In terms of the update to April, it would be a general mental health update, and with the view to the implementation plan coming June. I think, Sally, was that what the timeline was in terms of being able to collate all the information up from the end of April? We felt that June would be a more realistic timescale for bringing the implementation plan. I think, sorry, I know, Sally, you're going to come in. I think, Chair, if I may, in terms of the Angus plan, there is also work going on for a Tayside-wide plan as well. So we really need to make sure that we are involved in that, but we need to make sure that we're obviously on similar timescales with that as well. But just to give assurance where there's things in the implementation that we would like to do, we're not waiting on a plan necessarily to do that. Where there's things within the service that we notice and see that there's improvements that we could make, for example, the ECS and the extension of that, why would we wait on a plan to do that when the data and the information from the people using that service is really, really positive, and we know that it is the right thing to do. So it's a bit of a balance between getting what's actually going to be written down on paper that's been informed by the staff, that's been informed by the service users, the carers, etc., as well as linking it to the strategic direction, both from a mental health perspective, but from an Angus strategic planning perspective as well.
That's really helpful. Thanks very much, Jill, especially what you were saying there in terms of not waiting. You know, if there's something that looks like it can be done now and it's going to make it. So I think that's really helpful. So other comments and questions, Councillor Bell?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you so much, Gillian. I have to say my confidence has grown exponentially, you know, from a year ago with that latest update, and I'm really grateful to you for it. There are a couple of questions, if I can sneak them in. Obviously, I'm really pleased to see the 7-day service roll out. It feels like we've been waiting for that forever, and I'm getting a sense that it's worth waiting for. I wondered when the evaluation might be ready for that, and I'm pleased to see that it's supporting people who are thinking about or planning suicide. And even though the evaluation's just started, do we have any anecdotal evidence around that 7-day service is preventing people requiring an inpatient admission? Because I think that was really one of our ambitions for that service, and around pharmacy reviews, for example. And the other question I had was around the Mulberry unit decision. I noted on page 50 that we're awaiting a decision from the Mental Health Strategic Leadership Group. I'm wondering when that might be. And I'm kind of hoping for an assurance that underpinning that decision has been a significant degree of engagement with people with lived experience. So fingers crossed that you can give me some of that as well. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Bell. In terms of the Mulberry unit, and Gail might want to come in here. So we did have the opportunity to spend time with the Tayside exec partners recently, and one of the things that we did discuss was in relation to the inpatient setting for mental health. There's, as you're aware, there's been the option appraisal done. There's been an expert panel this year that have concluded that one inpatient unit for mental health would be the direction of travel, and the base of that in terms of the location has to be agreed, and that's what we're waiting on in terms of a decision. Gail, I'm just going to invite you in terms of the position around that responsibility in that decision making because I know it's been a bit of discussion around that as well.
Absolutely. Jill, your response is accurate. There is no decision has been made at this moment, and how they're going to do that has yet to be confirmed. But that is an ongoing conversation at the moment. There's meetings this week as well. There's continued meetings throughout. I think it's Friday afternoon actually on another meeting.
Thanks, Gail. We did get commitment, Councillor Bell, from certainly the NHS Chief Executive around progressing decisions around that, although there is no specific timescale around it. In terms of the 7-day rollout, I think it is great to see that, and the feedback from the staff is also really positive, and I'll ask Terry to come in around some of the specifics, Julie. What we are also seeing though is support from that downstream as well, so supporting people who can come out of an inpatient unit at the weekend as well, because we've got that enhanced service to support them. So that's the other side of it, which is also working well. Terry, I don't know if you want to come in around the specifics around prevention of admission, etc.
Yeah, so the consultation you'd asked about, the evaluation, that's just starting just now, because we had to give the service time to bed in, and actually the South was just added in September, so it's not that long to bed in, so it's a bit difficult to say with the data just now, like how much prevention of admission there is. But anecdotally, there is prevention of admission because of risk that people, if they hadn't had a service at the weekend, that we would have been too concerned to leave them at home over the weekend without that support. And there's definitely evidence of people with early supported discharge. In fact, we commenced the South a week early because there was a lack of inpatient beds, and we managed to get 3 people discharged who otherwise would have remained in hospital. So we are commencing the evaluation now, but we need to just take care. We don't do it too quickly, and we need time to bed it in, like I said.
Okay.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to apologise if there's any background noise. I'm getting a bathroom fitted and it's quite loud. Can I just echo Jill's positivity around a lot of what's said in this paper? I suppose any delay is frustrating and any delay carries risk, but I don't doubt any of the work being done and the commitment towards everyone in this area. You know, real positive development officer, 7-day service, the peer workers, the comms and engagement plan, but the ECS in particular, I thought it was really helpful to read some of the positive comments. Gail stole my thunder in speaking about the lack of patient survey responses, only 5%, but I think that just further strengthens the need and the importance of work. I'm really pleased to hear that Hayley and her team will be involved in that process too. On to the risk, and this was my question, and again, Councillor Bell's point on lived experience being involved in any consultation around Mulberry, for example, is important. But my question was around the Seaton Grove work. I mean, it suggests that obviously discussions with private care providers have been unsuccessful to this date. I just wonder to what degree they've been unsuccessful and why. Is that a COVID delay or other?
Thank you, Peter. So just on your first point around the frustration, I think there's been a lot of frustration in the system, but what we've done is that we've used that frustration in a positive way to try come at things from a more positive angle and a can-do perspective, rather than letting that frustration get us down and really bog us down in what we can't do. So we're trying to use that frustration in a positive way. George, I don't know if you want to come in initially around Seaton Grove, and then Terry might want to come in.
Yeah, I think the lack of interest from providers there wasn't a sophisticated reason for that, Peter. I think it was just that no particular provider wanted to take that role on at this point in time. So that as a outsourced service is a non-starter. Now I think the work on Seaton Grove hasn't quite concluded, so I don't want to jump the gun. But I think the need looks like it's changing. That the service leaders work on the basis of projecting need ahead with the known and anticipated client group. And that's the same way that learning disability, for example, works. They look at the client group that's around, and the need can change over time. And I think Terry's probably coming to a view that what is required is more in the line of supported housing than a residential facility. But we're not quite at the end of that road yet. Terry, do you want to comment on that?
The demand, it does seem to be that with COVID and just changes in people's expectations and needs, that it is more supported housing, but we just need to make that final decision next week. But the forecasted need definitely shows a much higher requirement for support housing over the next 5 years than it does for residential care, and particularly for this younger age group. If we can get the amount of support within a support housing complex, that would certainly seem to meet the need. But we need to just do a bit more work next week and then get to a final decision.
That's interesting and helpful. Thank you.
Okay, Elaine.
Thanks. It's just one question and then just a reflection. The Child and Adolescent Services report entirely through the operational line, but really just for information that we've had really quite a significant uptick in funding for CAMS services, and there's quite a significant recruitment programme ongoing, really for staff at all levels, so psychology, for nursing, and we're looking to really try and get everyone into really much more engagement with our services, much more feedback. We're also really keen to try and get our young people seen. We're reporting the risk of young people not being seen, and actually the appointment times in sort of the mental ill health part of CAMS have improved of recent weeks and months, and we're also really addressing the neurodevelopmental, so the children with ADHD, with autistic spectrum disorders, and really trying to redesign the pathways to make them the most efficient, most effective. We have adverts going out for child and adolescent psychiatrists, recognising it's a national shortage. Lothian, Glasgow are struggling to appoint, but really we have probably the biggest funding uplift we've seen for CAMS, and it's really letting us do a whole lot of strategy documents have been written since 2018 about what CAMS should look like. This is inpatient, this is national services, it's the complex things like National Learning Disability Unit, and Tayside are going to be able to host an inpatient intensive psychiatric care unit for young people, something that Scotland has not had. And because of the kind of funding uplift, we will get 3, and Tayside is the site for 1. And it will also let us look at support for Rossi, our secure care facility in Montrose, and a recognition that no community mental health team really can accommodate sometimes the needs at Rossi on a population estimate basis, but there's going to be some national work, and really we're taking some leadership roles across the north, and some national work in that as well. So I think it's a great time for CAMS. We recognise it's hard to recruit, but that's the same across the way. But the other reflection really was just on absolutely a year on, where just the team are going and the work, and that service development stuff that we'd almost given up hope perhaps of some of that delivery. But it is great to see the report today with that, and it just feels very authentic. It feels that this is meaningful services that are being delivered for our community. So I think it's just a thanks really to the team for all this hard work, and also I think we might come and meet with you to get some of your ideas really about that engagement. That's what we want to get, is the public engagement and that co-production of design. So thanks very much, and yes, don't min it, but we'll come and nick your ideas.
Thanks very much, Elaine, and thanks for that update as well at the start in terms of the CAMS funding. That was really interesting to hear that. Hayley.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just a couple of comments I suppose will complement the report and all the work that's already been done within Angus. Some of the work that Voluntary Action Angus are leading on with the wider third sector at the moment, one of which you'll all be aware of is the Community Mental Health and Wellbeing Fund that's now live. So that was the monies that come from Scottish Government, and we've been working in partnership with the IGB and Angus Council as well as third sector to create a partnership panel, and I'm pleased to say that that's now all up and running, and the closing date for this fund is the 22nd of December. So what the hope is from this fund is that it targets grassroots small community group organisations to provide innovative ideas to improve mental health and wellbeing across the county. So I think we'll have a huge benefit in some of this funding being ploughed into the communities of Angus. The second thing that I think I've mentioned before in the IGB meetings, which is well underway now, is the community research work that's going on across Angus, and that's very much about a community's needs analysis. VA are leading on that with 4 other third sector partners, but the purpose in this is to identify what the needs are post-COVID. I say post-COVID very reluctantly because I don't think we're post-COVID, but certainly post the lockdowns, we'll say, and where people are at now. And when I say people, I mean the public, where we're at and what we need to, how we need to focus our resources into which part of the communities that need it most. So that will very much, a mental health and wellbeing kind of theme will very much underpin most of what comes out of that research. And I think that that's a huge benefit for us in Angus, because what we've done is hired consultants to carry out this work, and come January we'll have a comprehensive report which details what the needs are across Angus and how then we can work as a partnership to meet some of those needs and as I say, focus our resources on what really matters. So I think that just complements some of the work that Gillian and Terry and others have already been working on throughout the year. So another addition, shall we say.
That's really helpful. Thanks very much, Hayley. I'm going to give the last word to Jill. I see your hands up, Jill.
Thank you, Chair. I should have said when I was introducing the paper, we're having a lot of conversations across the system around I'm going to say changing the narrative around mental health, because I think we're all aware that a lot of the narrative and the public comms have been quite, not our comms, but there's been a lot of negativity around mental health. And what we really want to do is try and change some of that narrative in a way that we can promote and support people to come and tell us their stories as well. So trying to get underneath some of that stigma that's attached to mental health, because sometimes that stigma prevents people from coming forward. So yes, we've maybe had 5% of a response rate. Yes, we can absolutely do better around that, but there's something for us around saying and being really open and supportive about it's okay to come and tell us your story, whether it's good or bad, and to try and really get rid of a lot of that stigma that is there around mental health. And it's really heartening to see the national campaign at the moment around the use of language for those that are patients within substance misuse as well. And we know that substance misuse and mental health often go together. So there is something around how we change that narrative and how we try and really and role model it ourselves around getting rid of that stigma that is attached to mental health, and I include substance use in that as well, Chair.
Thanks. And sorry, I didn't see Councillor Speed's hand up before.
Sorry, yeah, I think my hand control function maybe isn't working. It keeps jumping on and off. Yeah, it is good to kind of read and kind of see and hear today kind of the progress that is being made. But I think, as has already been said on a number of occasions, it's absolutely crucial that the progress and improvements being made are felt by those with, current experiences of needing access to mental health supports and services. And I know from within my constituency that, there are many kind of individuals, children, adults, families as a whole who are really struggling, and even more so over the last year, especially with kind of long wait times. So I guess I just wanted to kind of go on to a couple of questions or queries, if I could just get some clarification with regards to the peer support rollout. I'd asked for feedback on that at our last IGB meeting, and although it had stated it had commenced, it hadn't. So just some assurances that has now commenced now. and also with regards to some of the projects that are being delivered in terms of mental health. On page 47, I've raised this before with regards to kind of the learning disabilities and mental health project, but also just picking up on kind of George's comments earlier with regards to demographics and an increase of individuals with autism or kind of complex disability needs. I just wondered, you know, where that kind of group fits into mental health and what's been done there to ensure that they have the correct pathways of support.
Thank you, Councillor Speed. So just in terms of the peer support, I know then the last paper it was I think it was due to go live either the day or the day after we put the papers in, and then at last minute change, which is why, although the report stated, and I think I said that at the IGB itself, that we weren't able to start it. But Terry, do you want to come in on the peer support?
So the adults, sorry, the adult peer support is fully operational in all GPs in Angus, and there actually is capacity left within that service. So the more we can get information about that out, the better. The children and young people service, there was a last minute concern about the consent form that had to be adapted for young people, which caused some delay, but it is live now, like next week. Hillcrest is starting, Penumbra started already, so that is up and running already now. And we're really hopeful because referrals are coming in already for that, and it will be, individual work and also group work as well alongside the schools.
Thanks, Terry. George, I don't know if you want to come in on the work that you're doing around LD.
Yeah, so we're doing quite a lot of work on this in the transitions group, Lois. So we think we're reasonably well served for people who have autism and learning disability, but it's have autism alone, and it's a broad-ranging spectrum. And where we've got to with that is we're trying to identify resources to support an initiative in the third sector. A small support team, I think, is what we need, and our third sector rep on the transitions group and I have been having some kind of active discussions about that. As always, the challenges are how will we fund it. I think we've got a bit of clarity about what we think is needed and the kind of scale of the task and how it should look, and we're now working on funding. I think that kind of service probably sits best in the third sector, and also the third sector is good at attracting matched funding. So we've just began to have discussions about that, but that's a direction of travel.
Okay, thank you. And just really, if I may, Jane, or sorry, I know it's Gail's hand's gone up. But it was really just a kind of final closing comment with regards to that bit about engagement, but also helping to kind of, you know, overcoming some of the challenges with regards to getting information out with regards to what support's available, especially given that, you know, we are still, you know, children and families maybe not accessing school and supports there in the same way, in a face-to-face way, as well as kind of other areas. And we know that not everyone has access to online to perhaps pick up information and supports that's out there. So I know it's quite a challenge, but I think we just need to continue to be mindful that, you know, people are not going into their GP surgery or attending places that they perhaps would have kind of headed to for support in the past. And I don't know how we kind of overcome all of that, but I do think that that's something that we need to look at.
That's great. Thanks very much. Gail, did you want to come in?
Sorry, Imogen, I was just about to say, is it okay if I come in on Lois's last point? There's lots of work going on around whole family support, and there's work going on that's supported by Columba 1400 around the work that we are doing, and we've had two Angus cohorts, and that's really bringing together health, social work, educator, and it's really looking at exactly what you're describing. What can we do together to have a whole family approach? And a lot of that is around the intervention and prevention work, but there's also lots of work that I think, now that we've got that established, and the relationships and the connections there, around how we truly have a whole family approach to things. So just to give, there is a bit of light at the end of the tunnel with that, Councillor Speed, and it's actually quite an exciting time at the moment around that, I think.
Okay, thanks Gillian, thanks Emma-Jane.
Gail?
Yeah, Jill, in addition to that, Police Scotland are also involved in that work. So just that bit of reassurance, it is truly a whole system. And I think it's an ask, actually, of IGB members. I would like you and others to actually encourage people to tell their stories and share. Hayley Menz and I met with the chair of Angus Voices, who is very keen to share that individual story. But I would actually encourage you, if you've got people that do have a story to tell, then please encourage them to come forward. That would be really appreciated by us as well. Thanks.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks very much for that, Gail. I don't see any more hands up, but I think that's been a really useful discussion range of questions, a lot of information provided in that paper. Thank you very much, Jill. Thank you, Terry, as well, and George, and everybody who's contributed to that conversation. I think that's provided a lot of assurance, including some of the comments that came up in answer to questions that were asked. So thank you. In terms of the recommendations, there are a number. You'll have read them all within the paper. And then the requesting that update report, which will come to the April 2022 IJB meeting. So are we all happy with those recommendations? Yep. That's great. Well, thanks very much. So I'm proposing that we take a short comfort break now. I know we don't usually do that, but I think it's good practice to introduce that. So it's about 3:25 if we come back about 4:25. So we'll just have a 10-minute kind of stretch your legs and we'll see you back then. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, John. Chair, we're ready to go. Thank you.
That's great. Back, everybody. So we'll move now to item 7 on the agenda, which is the Primary Care Improvement Plan updates. Gail, can you advise who I'll be I know there's maybe a couple of people here for this one, and maybe Lisa, who's new, isn't that right?
Yep. Yes, I'd like to introduce Lisa Prudham, who's the new Primary Care Manager in Angus, to members this afternoon. Lisa, are you happy to take the report?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Gail. Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this paper is to provide an update, summary position of where we are with the delivery of the Primary Care Improvements Plan. And I'll just give you a flavour of what's in the paper, because obviously there's quite a bit of detail, and I'm happy to take comments and questions afterwards. Many of you will be familiar with the 2018 new GMS contract, which, as its main aim, had building a sustainable model of general practice, and it did so by the introduction of an extended multidisciplinary team and asked us to focus on several key areas. They were pharmacotherapy, VTP program, which is the vaccination program, community care and treatment services, urgent care such as social prescribing and physiotherapy, things like that. The original contract term was 2018 to 2021. However, in recognition of perhaps the impact of the pandemic and also some of the lessons being learnt during the contract duration, Scottish Government have issued a revised and updated Memorandum of Understanding, MOU2, in July of this year. MOU2 asks us to refocus our efforts onto 3 main priority areas for delivery by 2022, and also sets out for boards that if we fail to do that, there may be some transitionary arrangements put in place. The areas that we're asked to refocus on are vaccination programme, pharmacotherapy, and community care and treatment services. And in the paper there, I've detailed exactly under the current position what the ask is of the contract. The other areas, although they've got an extended into 22-23, and also we might be waiting for further guidance. So they're things like urgent care and additional professional roles, but they're still a priority in terms of the signatories of the contract, and they're still local areas of interest for us. So the proposals section details exactly what we've achieved to date in Angus, and gives a flavour of some of the recent developments that have been taking place. So the VTP programme, the vaccination programme, it's well progressed. We've been performing well in this area, not just in Angus, but across the region, and we're on target to deliver that by March 2022. So been some recent discussions around the travel vaccination element, and we've been working to develop a service level agreement which will enable community pharmacists to help deliver that, and again that's all on target to be achieved on time. I'm going to move to the community care and treatment service. Again, this is an area in Angus that we've made significant progress, and we've also developed our hub and spoke model. And for the practices not covered by a hub, we have spoke arrangements going into place. So again, every practice will be covered by this service by the 31st of March, and we're on target there as well. The third area that we're asked to focus on as a prioritisation is the pharmacotherapy service. And here things are a little bit more challenging, as we're only likely to have a partial service across Tayside by the 31st of March 2021. And predominantly the reasons why this area is a bit more challenging is around workforce and recruitment and retention difficulties. And I know Michelle's on the line, so I'm sure she will come in the question section perhaps and give you a bit more information about that if required. But I'm highlighting that that's an area where there's a little bit more concern. In terms of other areas where Locally, we found it difficult to progress. Urgent care has been an area that we're keen to progress locally. It's not a priority for the end of March next 2022, but it is an area that we would wish to focus on. And the reasons why that's been more challenging is our programme there looked at working with the ambulance service, and obviously the COVID has had quite a big impact on them. But we are looking to refocus on that issue and look at what else we could do, as well as restart negotiations with ambulance and see if there's anything that we can progress there. So that's the kind of flavour of how we're performing in those areas. The other thing just to draw your attention to, and the financial section details our spending, but also we have had some difficulty in spending all of the budget that we've been given, particularly in terms of non-recurring funding streams, and this has built up a bit of a reserve, it's on the recommendations that we come back with a plan about that in the future, but also just to say that we have a local and regional meeting plan to look at how we might start to spend some of that money. And then the main risks of the programme and why, the challenges that we faced are around recruitment and retention. There is a risk around transitionary payments that might be applicable for the services that we are not able to fully implement by March 2022, and premises as well is also an area where it's challenging to be able to put in all the services that we would want, particularly around practices, etc.
That's great. Thanks very much, Lisa, and welcome as well. Nice to see you. So I'll open it up for any questions or comments. Peter.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Lisa. I'm the carers representative for Angus. I'm very concerned about the vaccination transformation programme. It seems to be hugely vague to me. And I'll give you an example. Carers are used to taking their people with learning disabilities, with autism, down the road to their local practice, seeing the familiar faces, familiar building, getting a jab for people they know. That doesn't seem to be replaced by anything at the moment.
Alison want to come in, or?
Yeah, I can come in. So the Transformation Programme is a programme across NHS Tayside led by Public Health, and that's consistent with the new GMS contract. And so we don't really have a choice about that, and I appreciate that it's not necessarily convenient for people to receive a vaccination in a different way to what they're used to, and many people like attending their local GP practice. So there's a balance to be struck between being able to offer vaccinations within central locations to meet effectiveness, but also ensuring that that doesn't result in resulting health inequalities. And as a GP myself, I would have to say that we're all seeing that we have concerns about health inequalities here and how we address that moving forward. And it is really about the balance between having to get that COVID programme of vaccinations out quickly. But I do know that there is a piece of work going on around the inequalities with Public Health to look at that. And certainly from a primary care perspective and a partnership perspective, we are around the table in the Vaccination Transformation Programme making these cases, and very much it's about our frail elderly, it's about our people with other health inequalities and how we best support them to receive the vaccinations. Also, a lot of queries within general practice. Why can't we deliver them in general practice, a lot of the vaccinations? And, it's a bit of a chicken, a difficult situation, because GPs want to be involved in some senses, but we also have all the other work that GPs are struggling to deliver, all the other non-COVID work. So I know that there is consideration being given to other aspects of primary care, such as optometrists, dentists, helping us out here, and community pharmacists, to see how we can deliver vaccinations, within communities, but not necessarily affecting the GP workforce, which if we're doing vaccinations, we're not doing other things. So hopefully that's helpful, and absolutely we're taking your concerns on board and raising them at that NHS Tayside level.
Okay. I'm not particularly happy with the answer, I have to say, Alison. You know, if we're talking about putting people into cars, taking them miles to central places, joining a queue of hundreds of people, maybe standing in the rain outside the cared hall like they were doing, that's not good for anybody.
Okay, thanks for that, Peter. Did I see Councillor Bell?
Thank you, Chair, and hi, Lisa. Thanks for your report, and it's nice to meet you. I'm an elected member on the board. I guess on one hand, I'm quite pleased to see that, you know, urgent care plans, community link workers and additional professional roles should continue, and services in place should be maintained, but that the expectation is that further development may be at a bit slower pace. I guess on one hand, I'm quite pleased that they're not stopping altogether, but something like that might rub up against our plans around our prescribing budget, for example. You know, in the next paper that comes up, something that I would have been keen to see is an extension, I guess, of social prescribers on the back of the impact that they're making. So, to what extent might there be some local flexibility in all of that? You know, to meet other needs in local areas? Are you aware? Can you give us some insight into that?
So I think that's an important point you raised, that these things aren't to stop. They're just refocusing the prioritisation of what has to be delivered in the first instance, with a view to continuing the work, albeit at a slightly slower pace, and enable us to deliver the first set of priorities. So I think, you know, certainly from a GP perspective and the LMC, we hear very strong terms that you know that these other areas are equally as important, and they are important to us locally. So there's no expectation that, you know, we're taking our foot off the pedal in terms of those. Nationally, I think it's difficult to give a perspective. What we are about to go into is a round of meetings. The government's having meetings with all boards across Scotland to go where we're all at, see what we're struggling with, see what the challenges are. And I think following those, there will probably be more national direction coming out. And it is variable across the country and even across our own region.
To come in on that point as well, just so your hand went up.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and Alison might want to contribute as well. I think if Councillor Bell, if we go back to the strategic planning paper that George presented, there's the urgent care work stream as part of that as well. So we've had urgent care as part of the Angus Care model kind of programme of works looking at urgent care. Traditionally, daytime urgent care sat separate to out of hours urgent care. And one of the things through the national work that we're looking to do in Tayside is how we bring that together and look at urgent care on a 24/7 basis, rather than if it happens between 8 and 6, this is what to do, and if it happens between 6 and 8, then this is what to do. So there's a lot of discussions ongoing at the moment around the national redesign of urgent care, what that means for Tayside, and then what that means for us in Angus. And within Angus, we're very keen to take a quality improvement approach to what we're doing around urgent care. And we're lucky to have Dr. Scott Jamieson, who is going to take a lead on the urgent care side of things with Lisa, who's also involved in a national quality improvement programme. And that is going to be his project, so to speak. So Angus will absolutely benefit from that. But we are very keen, Councillor Bell, to look at unscheduled care and urgent care from a 24/7 perspective and start to join some of those discussions up. But we need to make sure it links to the national direction around urgent and unscheduled care as well. And at the moment, we're still waiting on some information coming out nationally around the different phases of redesign of urgent care.
Alison, did you want to come in as well on that point?
Yeah, what I would add is that we also need to consider our overall workforce, and that we're not robbing Peter to pay Paul. We have some very highly talented district nurses who are able to respond on many occasions, and we're waiting for the national guidance on potential for rebanding and how we develop that service, because if we can develop that service, then that may assist us and have look at additional skills within the team, but also developing nurse practitioner, advanced nurse practitioners. Really keen to get the model that works. And with Angus's geography, having a central team travelling around the countryside is not necessarily the best thing compared to enhancing the team, for example, in Kirriemuir, Brechin. You know, people want care in their communities, and the local knowledge that you have within daytime urgent care and out of hours urgent care is hugely important in making teams effective. So I'm really keen that it's all linked up, and I think that's possibly why we've not made as much progress, because we have been focusing on developing our enhanced community support teams and the district nursing service. So it maybe feels like we've not made so much progress. So moving forward, I know that Scott is very keen on this, having conversations with Karen Fletcher, our lead nurse, on how we do this, but do it with people and really focusing on building up the skills within our nursing workforce who are going to be so key to this.
Okay, Andrew Jack.
Yeah, it's maybe just a kind of development of it. Some of the questions have partially been answered, but I was aware that we're enhancing care services at the GP level, and particularly Monifieth. The model there is being rolled out to all the other practices. The hubs, as far as I understand, are based around minor injury units, and spokes kind of feed into those. I'm not clear what services are going to be provided by the enhanced services at the GP level, at the practice level, and what services are going to be provided at these hubs and how they devolve down to the spokes. I'm not sure how it all works together. It seems counterintuitive. Maybe it's different types of services. Somebody could maybe clarify that for me. Thanks.
Alison?
Yes, so people should receive a service local to them, and it should be the same high standard of service no matter where you live in Angus. So we recognise, as I said before with the geography, that people receiving services around their general practice really works if you're in Brechin, Monifieth, Carnoustie, Kirriemuir, but also that where practices are in a more central location like Arbroath or Forfar, going to a hub might release capacity within the GP surgery where premises may not allow you to have as many services within the one building. So we are working on the spokes being the same service that you would have if you were in a hub for services that should be available locally, things that are done often and more simple, things like ECGs or blood pressure measurements or blood tests. And these are common things done often, and we're working very hard that patients experience a service locally that's good. For more complicated tests are best done where there's a level of expertise or the equipment's more expensive. And I'm thinking things like ear syringing where you have expensive equipment, although we do have it in Monifieth and Carnoustie. You know, you might expect people to travel. And the other one that we're particularly looking at the moment is for the DIPD, a once in a journey test like spirometry, where the equipment, we need it well calibrated, well interpreted. And if we have that more centrally, where people have to travel maybe to 2 or 3 locations in Angus, that allows us to put the specialist nursing and expertise in it. So we've got Nico Grunenberg there, who's a safety and quality fellow and Angus and Tayside Quality Improvement Lead for General Practice, heavily involved in how we are doing this with a quality approach, and his particular interest is around patient experience. So we are trying to work in our models, refine them, recognising we don't have a lot of time to implement these, the primary care improvement plans. So we are working as we go along, refining how we communicate the results of an investigation such as a blood pressure back to general practice. But it is very much with a QI approach, and we're, for example, I know in White Hills they have looked at patient experience on coming to get your blood pressure checked. It was confidentiality maintained, was environment suitable. So we are including the patient voice in that.
Yeah, that's very good.
Okay, and Councillor Speed.
Yeah, thanks, Emma Jane. Hi, Lisa. It was with regards to page 67. and under the mental health services and the challenges around finding space and accommodation within GP practices. I just wondered if you could give a little bit more detail on that. Have all those challenges been overcome? If not, how many practices are not managing to accommodate that service, and what does the alternative arrangements look like? I've heard a couple of kind of experiences where people are maybe having to meet kind of peer support workers in a cafe, for example, and that may work for some people, but for others who perhaps where their mental health is suffering, where it's quite an emotional experience, it might not be appropriate. So yeah, a bit more information on that, please.
Jill, I saw your hand had gone up.
Yeah, Lisa, do you want to come in first? I was just going to say Terry might be able to respond to some of that as well, because Terry's obviously been heavily involved in that. But Lisa?
I can't give you the exact list of locations. I'm aware of a couple. I think this is something that we recognise is a risk. But premises across the patch is an area that is under pressure, and we're working on, and there will be separate discussions about premises going forward. It is challenging. I think it is a risk that we've identified, that as much as we, the move is to move to extend the team, to grow the practice team, to have these wraparound services, but we've got the footprint of the buildings that we have. So it is a challenge going forward, but it's something that we're well aware of and working to try and address.
Okay, thank you.
Do you want me to jump in? Throughout COVID, the patient support was moved to telephone only or near me just due to risk. So in that time period, a lot of the services in the GP practice have changed. I've needed more rooms for social distancing. So it's not impacted on the amount of appointments being provided, but it has impacted on the ability to shift from telephone to face-to-face appointments. So we've got a mixed model just now, and we'll continue to have a mixed model because there's quite a lot of people who prefer either near me or telephone, and actually it'd be quite difficult to get to an appointment. But we do need a bit more space in practices, but it definitely isn't impacting on the service being delivered apart from the number of face-to-face slots. But we are working on that.
Okay, thank you.
And Councillor Miles.
Yes, it's a comment rather than a question. Very heartened to hear the development of the primary care improvement plan, and especially as one lives out in the rural areas, how accounts be taken for the distance they have to travel to get to appointments and everything else. And to follow up a question I think Peter raised, I raised the same question in the Public Health Committee about trying to get more of the vaccination programme done locally. Because it was creating a lot of problems, especially for some of the elderly and infirm and the rural areas getting to. So it has been recognised and has been raised, and they're trying to address it as best they can. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Okay, if we don't have any further questions, we just move to the recommendations that are in the report. You'll have seen them in terms of noting progress. There's a recommendation with regard to the reserves and formulation of a spend plan, and that a wider update paper is brought to the April 2022 meeting of Angus IJB. Are we all happy with those recommendations? Yep. Okay, thanks very much. Thanks Lisa, and welcome again. Okay, if we move on now to item 8, which is prescribing management. So I'm just moving on my papers. And we've got Michelle with us, have we?
Yep. I'd like to introduce Michelle Logan-Rena, who's our pharmacy lead. Michelle will start off the report, and she'll be supported by Dr. Clement to back her there.
Thank you, Gail. Thank you, Chair. This is our 6-monthly update report. I believe we last discussed prescribing management in around June time, where I know that we talked about the fact that we continue to be above the Scottish average in terms of cost and items. In this report, I can say that we're fairly stable in that. We're not making the improvements maybe that we have seen in past years, but we are holding our position. But because we haven't made those gains that we've seen previously, the this is the reasons why we're looking at increasing our prescribing risk, and we've also thought about how we can refresh the approach that we take to our management of the prescribing position. So we have an Angus prescribing management group that meets every couple of months to look at our position, and from January time onwards we're going to try and have a bit of a refresh of that. We have still got very strong clinical leadership on that group, but it has been problematic, I suppose, in the last sort of 18 months, just with everything else that's been going on, to make the gains that we would have really liked. So we're going to have this sort of refreshed, different approach in January, which will hopefully allow us to have a suite of projects developed that the practices will be able to tap into a little bit more easily than they maybe have done in the last 18 months. We also have Dr. Clement and Lisa have mentioned Nico Grunenberg. We have him, our GP QI fellow. He ran with Dr. Clement a really good session early summertime on quality management of prescribing, and it was really well attended. There's been some follow-up meetings, and we really hope to utilise the expertise of Dr. Grunenberg going forward, and I think that will be quite key to sustainability of our projects and our approach to the prescribing management. There are some issues that we can't hide from. Lisa mentioned pharmacotherapy as part of the contract. Pharmacotherapy is ongoing. The approach to pharmacotherapy is ongoing, but we do have some resource issues in terms of staffing to deliver that, and because of that, that restriction in the workforce, that has led to us not maybe having quite as much time devoted to cost-saving work and prescribing efficiency work as we may have had previously, and we do have some real issues in terms of recruitment and retention of pharmacy staff at the moment, particularly pharmacists, and I know that's been seen across the board, and it's also affecting a lot of community pharmacy as well. So I suppose we need to try and get a balance between what our cost-saving work and also supporting the sustainability of the primary care services and the primary care that we're trying to deliver. So we are looking at going forward as part of remobilisation, looking at the importance of non-medicines, and I think somebody mentioned previously the social prescribers and how we can utilise those volunteers as an alternative to a prescription, and I think that will help. It will help not only patients, but it will also help in terms of the numbers of workforce that we have to deliver the medicines interventions that would previously may have been our first port of call, let's just say. Hopefully in the future, if we can start to build on the really good work that's out there already, utilising the social prescribers and the other options that are out there, that will also help to get our prescribing in check. We're also lucky enough to have the NHSTSA is working with Scottish Government. There's a therapeutics division and there's a pilot of a polypharmacy decision support tool. So we've been lucky in Angus that 4 of our GP practices in Angus have been accepted onto that pilot. And again, that's about looking at people who are on polypharmacy, many medicines, trying to work out if they're still all required, and if we can get some really good medication review work done as part of that pilot, then that in itself will help us to reduce the amount of prescriptions, the costs, the items that we're seeing. So I think we've been quite lucky that we've been accepted onto that. I suppose the other thing that has been very recent and isn't actually in the report, but we have also been accepted, many of the practices in Angus have now been accepted onto a Health Improvement Scotland pilot for looking at acute prescribing and how we can make acute prescribing or special request prescribing systems better, just improvement work, which again will involve a lot of medication review work for patients who are on polypharmacy. So again, it's just another little string to our bow while we try to maintain the focus on clinical quality work, but also keeping an eye on our prescribing spend at the same time. So I think that's probably sums up what we've been doing in the last sort of 6 months, but I'm happy for if Alison wants to come in, or if anyone has any questions, then I'm happy to take them.
Alison, did you want to come in at this point, or?
Well, I'd just like to make the connection between the prescribing work and the early intervention and prevention work that George was referring to in the strategic planning paper. So if we can create good alternatives to a prescription, as we've discussed and has been agreed with the IGB as an approach previously, then it will help us. And noting that last time we looked at the top 70 drugs expenditure items, the ones that are increasing are around mental health and chronic pain, which are two areas of care where we can work with terms of exercises. Therapy's got good evidence, or increasing your activity is good evidence for pain, helping more very often than painkillers, and also considering the value of exercise within mental health and the work with Angus Alive. Hopefully we can develop programmes of work that are based on evidence, and thinking about falls prevention as well, with better balance classes and gyms potentially reducing falls risks. And that is, you know, these interventions have a lot more evidence than some of the drugs that are used to treat some of our frailer patients. So it's all it's getting to the stage that the easy, quick wins are gone now. There's some maybe around non-medicine use, but the quick wins are more difficult to find. It's the more strategic things that are about investing in quality care, alternatives to prescription, things that perhaps are more difficult, take longer, but are worthwhile in the longer run in terms of meeting the aims in our strategic plan.
That's great. Thanks very much to you both. Do we have any comments or questions on this paper? Peter Drury.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's good, and I've been encouraged by the comments just made. I'm intrigued by something in paragraphs where it says that the Angus Prescribing Management Group recognises the financial risks associated with promoting social prescribing. What risks are they?
So just to answer that, it would be that where you have relying on, it's about relying on the more complex interventions to save money. That's what we're referring to there. If you do a switch project where you switch from one medicine to another, or when you're stopping a medicine, you know that you will save that amount of money, and you will save it for however long you were expected to otherwise be prescribing that drug. Where you're introducing a complex intervention such as exercise for chronic pain, you're not necessarily stopping medication right away. It's about giving people alternatives. So it's difficult to define the cost saving associated with that intervention, because it's more complex. It depends on perhaps in your relationship with your patients, interactions that are less within your control. So that's what that's referring to.
Just because you can't measure it doesn't mean to say it doesn't exist. And I would have thought that self-evidently social prescribing reduces costs over the medium and longer term. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, 100% agree with that. That is really our focus. It's about taking that risk that it's the right thing to do in the medium to long term, and having the confidence that it's the right thing to do when the temptation, if you feel that you're slightly, well, you know, a considerable amount when you think of the actual cost of money involved above the Scottish average. It'd be tempting to focus on getting it down to the Scottish average, but it might be that some of our prescribing for long-term conditions is appropriate. And so with IGB's backing, absolutely, I would support us taking that risk in terms of doing the complex stuff that's maybe hard to quantify, but that with social prescribing in general is shown to have better outcomes for people.
Yeah, good, thank you.
Councillor Speed? That's maybe a legacy hand, actually, I'm not sure.
Yeah, sorry, Imogen, it is. It's shouldn't be there.
No problem. Andrew? I think you're on mute, Andrew.
Right, okay. Sorry about that. Thank you, Chair. It was just a comment that was in on page 77, the risk, and it says, you know, without a continued downward trajectory in prescribing spend, the Angus IGB will need to realign resources from other services to support ongoing prescribing spend level. It sounds quite an alarming sort of thing, and the trend is that the risk's going up and up and up every time. We seem to be placing a lot of store by the polypharmacy tool, among other things. The expected time frame for that and other measures to start taking effect and reverse the trend of that critical risk that seems to be rising all the time.
So prescribing risk is really difficult to quantify, and that's for a number of reasons. We don't have prescribing data available to 6 months later, and we do monitor it, but it isn't available right away. We're really at the mercy of trends in terms of the cost. At any point, the costs of prescription medicines could go up, and that's different for different medicines. So if you have something Angus prescribes proportionately more of, then the cost goes up in relation to the rest of the UK or Scotland. So it's really unpredictable what's likely to happen, and similar with supply problems, it's really difficult to predict them. We do some forecasting through the prescribing support unit of NHS Tayside, and we are aware of some drugs on the horizon, and particularly drugs used in heart failure and other heart conditions, and we do monitor the likely impact of that. And Tayside tends to be a early adopter of the best evidence in terms of new drugs, and that's a historical. We're a teaching hospital on our doorstep, and so we do monitor that, and that's monitored through the Tayside Prescribing Management Group. So in terms of being able to quantify the exact amounts involved here, that is incredibly difficult. What we do is monitor trends and try to act quickly when we see trends, and I think that's what we're doing here. We're saying that the trends are not going where we would like them, and these are the actions that we're taking to continue to monitor, but not just monitor, how we're going to approach it. Regarding the polypharmacy tools, I'm pretty sure that project in the 4 practices is about to start pretty quickly. I think it's ready to go. It's a new pilot, it's not something that's been tested, so we do need to wait for the feedback from the practices involved and proper analysis as to whether this tool has worked or whether there's any glitches in the systems before we roll out more broadly. So there will be some delays, but with the priority given to this and the links nationally to this being the right thing to do, I don't anticipate that taking too long. And we do have prescribing projects available within general practice, and that allows us to look at the national therapeutic indicators. I know that you're familiar now on the national team for that, Andrew, so which is great to have the patient voice there, and we continue to monitor that, and where there's outlying practices in a particular area of prescribing, we do look at what bespoke support we could offer that practice. So I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you. That's good explanation. Thank you.
Okay, well, if we've got no further questions or comments, we'll just move to the recommendations, which are noting the content of the paper and request a further update be provided to the June meeting of the Angus IGB. Are we happy with those recommendations? Yep. Okay, well, thanks very much, Michelle, and thanks very much, Alison, as well. So we move now to item 9, which is the winter flu planning and COVID-19 update. Is it Jill we've got for this one?
Yes. Yeah, thank you, Chair. So again, we have to bring a winter plan for approval. It feels like we've been in winter for probably 2 years continually. So it's always quite interesting when we speak about winter planning, because actually for us, winter, it's just business as usual, or it has been for the last 2 years anyway. However, we do have to provide a winter plan from NHS Tayside's perspective, and that has to be developed with all partners across Tayside, and I include Scottish Ambulance Service in that as well as Fife Health and Social Care Partnership from a Tayside perspective. So you have a copy of the NHS Tayside winter plan, which details the approach taken to winter. The resilience obviously goes through the management of viral illness, norovirus, which we sometimes see a spike in winter. But I would just like to bring your attention to the specific Angus parts, and that's on page 123 of the combined documents. And that just lays out some of the key actions that we've collectively agreed across the 3 health and social care partnerships, but are very applicable to Angus. And I think it demonstrates that link back to a lot of the work that we spoke about throughout the IJB today in terms of early intervention and prevention, because the more we can do within the community to prevent admissions to hospital, the better that is for the patient and families, and the better it is for the services as well. We've also got section 6.5 and 7, which are on page 127 and 130 of the document, and that lays out the details in terms of primary care and out of hours, both applicable to Angus Health and Social Care Partnership. So the ask of the IGB around the winter plan itself is to approve that. I believe, Gail, Chair, I think it's going to the board in December for approval, and then it'll go into Scottish Government as our approved plan. Within the paper, we've updated and provided an update on the flu vaccination, and we've had a lot of discussion as part of the primary care paper in terms of the vaccination programme. But I think it is fair to say for both COVID vaccinations, including the 3rd doses and boosters, and the flu vaccinations at Tayside is continuing to perform very well in comparison to other board areas within Scotland. Sandy's mentioned the winter planning funding in his paper, and we have that additional funding, but also the funding provided to the boards for winter planning. At the time of writing the paper, we hadn't had that formally confirmed, but that is 1.5 million. We had 1 million from Scottish Government, and that's been increased to 1.5 from an NHS Tayside perspective. That funding is managed through the Unscheduled Care Board and has supported a number of services to look at specific pieces of work to support winter planning. And an example of that is out of hours and the use of advanced paramedic practitioners within the service to support that multidisciplinary approach to the service delivery. COVID-19, we've got an update in the paper, and I'm just going to refer to the paper itself because it's obviously changed since I've not got the update printed off. Obviously, we're in a bit of a position at the moment with the new variant. We're just not sure what's going to happen with that or where things are going. See today there's been quite a significant increase again within the new variant. And obviously there is some quite positive news around the vaccine and how that will work against the variant. Thank you, Sally. She's just messaged me. So for Angus, we're sitting at 200,000 within Angus. The pressure on the inpatient perspective, it has reduced quite significantly. And today I think there was 20 inpatients within NHS Tayside. And on a positive note, the number of patients within critical care, both HDU and ICU, have reduced quite significantly as well. So that's all heading in the right direction. But we continue to work with secondary care colleagues and primary care colleagues around that pathway. Sally, do you want to add anything else around the COVID update? Don't know if she's still on it.
Yeah, no, I am here. I was having technical issues. No, there's nothing really. It's just fluctuating a lot, but it is good to see that the number of cases is steadily reducing in Angus, and we're more on a par with the rest of Tayside. We were an outlier, but we are the same as Perth and Kinross now, but slightly more than Dundee, but not that it's a competition at all. But it does just go to show the fact that this is a very fluctuating situation and we're not out of the woods yet by any manner of means.
Thank you, Sally. Just in relation to risks, we've obviously heard previously the pressures on care at home, the funding that's come in to support the social care element of that and reduce delayed discharges. We continue to perform actually very well in relation to our delayed discharges, and I'm not including the mental health ones because I'm very conscious of what I said in the mental health update. But from an acute 9 wells perspective, we do perform very well, and the teams work exceptionally hard to keep the number of delayed discharges both in acute hospitals and indeed the community hospitals down. So I think all credit to the teams supporting care at home. I think just a bit of a risk around that, in that we've kind of used all our tools very early in the year, so to speak, and obviously George has raised some of the risks around that, but we have got the additional funding to hopefully put some additional capacity into those services. The National Winter Comms Toolkit has just come out today, so we should start to see some of that coming through the media very soon. NHS Tayside have started their local comms around that as well. So I think that's it, Chair. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Jill. I think it's a very comprehensive plan. It's really very good. I just had one question with regard to the COVID levels and the new variant. You mentioned there's quite a lot of fluctuation, and we're not kind of sure how it's going to go over the next few weeks. A while back, we were receiving updates with regard to the position in Angus to IJB members, and I just wondered, given that we don't have another IJB now until the sort of end of February, if Gail, if you felt it was useful to alert IJB members if those figures do, get to that stage where you feel that we should know about the services, the pressure on the services, then I wonder if that would be an option just between this IJB and the next one.
I'll do that anyway. I'll update you all anyway with a briefing note. Yeah.
Thanks very much. Okay, Councillor Bell.
Thank you, and thank you, Gillian. Again, we've got quite a lot of years' experience of doing our winter planning, which is standing us in good stead for the added pressure we're expecting. And I think my understanding is that the potential spike for the new variant of COVID is anticipated at the end of January. So that's something to be aware of. I was wondering about the Tayside and particularly Angus uptake of vaccination with pregnant women, because I'm aware that was an issue at a national level, and I just wondered if we'd had a similar experience and if that had been addressed, if people's confidence had been built up, and around any paediatric prevalence in COVID that we were seeing at the moment, please. Thanks very much.
Okay, I don't have specific data to hand, Councillor Bell, in terms of the uptake. I see that Elaine's put her hand up, who's got her other hat on as the Associate Medical Director for Women and Child Health, so will be able to come in and articulate way better than me where things are around that. I think with the paediatric side of things, what we are seeing, not necessarily in terms of vaccine, but my understanding is we've got a good uptake within Angus of the 12 to 15-year-olds. But obviously we've had quite a number of outbreaks in schools across Angus, and that's what kind of caused the spike earlier on in November. So, Chair, if it's okay just to ask Elaine to comment on the health side of things.
Yeah, thanks, Gillian. I think this is something we've been very aware of. I think our initial thoughts, we had about half of pregnant women were vaccinated, and there's been a lot of work done with midwives, and just at every antenatal visit is discussing it. We have a pathway where when pregnant women present, we've some almost ring-fenced capacity for testing, because some women, of course, do come in and very rapidly need an operation. They need a caesarean section. So we've been well supported in being able to have pregnant women at the right place. And when they can become very unwell. But the team are very attuned to it, and the midwives, led by Leslie Markey, our Associate Director of Midwifery, has been leading that effort to increase vaccination. And I'll ask her for an update for what that has been. For paediatrics, we're not seeing children becoming unwell. We're not seeing them being hospitalised. That seems to be the nature. They don't have severe illness, but the team have actually put the paediatric plan is embedded in the winter plan this year for the first time, and we're also doing a lot of work on RSV. So it causes bronchiolitis? Alison will correct me. Bronchiolitis in young children, and they've predicted, because they didn't mix last year, that there would be a spike this year, and that's due about December, end of December, start of January. So we're just asking for some updated national modelling about that. But paediatrics have settled into a pattern of very busy Tuesday and Wednesday, but they're able to and is embedded within the winter plan this year. Again, another Tayside development.
Thanks very much for that, Elaine. Thank you. And George, did you want to come in?
Yes, just anecdotally, we are noticing it as an issue in terms of uptake of the booster in care homes and care at home, especially amongst younger women who are understandably a bit nervous, I guess, about receiving the booster. And even though there now is quite good emerging research to say that it's pretty safe, I think probably amongst the young women group of staff, there are people who intend to become mums, and they're equally a bit nervous about it. So we have noticed that as a potential issue. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, George. Elaine, did you want to come in on that one?
It was just, I'm sure some of our community midwives would be happy to do an information session. I'm sure they could do even just a drop-in Zoom or Teams meeting about that. It's interesting, just today, there's a thought that actually a third booster will give you the same protection for the new variant as the 2 vaccines did for the previous ones. So this, I think, is going to be quite a public health one. But absolutely, George, if you can drop an email to me, and we could do an information session with some of the midwives.
Thanks, Elaine. It's tricky because there's about 40 provider organisations. So, but I'll have a chat with Ivan in the care home and care at home groups, and we could well take you up on the offer. Thank you.
Even a social media shout out or something to get them.
Councillor Bell.
Yeah, my next question was going to be what would help those care workers. What would they need to build that confidence? I'm really grateful to Elaine for coming in for that. But, given what George has just said about the number of providers, possible for comms to help on a handout or something that's emailable to all of those staff that might help just to cut down on duplication. But thanks, Elaine, that's a brilliant offer.
Okay, thanks for that. Sally and Gail, you could maybe take that up in terms of the support with regard to the comms. I think that would be really useful. And Jill?
Sally's just confirmed she will do that, Chair.
Perfect, thank you. Jill?
Yeah, thanks. Just to recognise that it's a year today since the first vaccine in Tayside as well. So the numbers have just come out, and so over the last year, from the 8th of December last year to this year, there's been 808,000 COVID vaccines delivered, 160,000 flu vaccinations delivered across Tayside. So that's actually really positive. So just to that anniversary, I guess.
Yeah, that's really useful to add that in on this item as well on this day. So thanks for that, Jill. if we've got no further comments or questions, just moving to the recommendations, we're being asked to approve and endorse the winter plan, and also there's various items to note, including the cost pressures, the whole system working, the approach taken to support flu vaccines, and the COVID-19 update. So are we happy with those recommendations? Yep. Okay, thanks very much to everybody involved in pulling that together and presenting today as well. So I've lost my agenda. Here we are. So, okay, well, we're on to, we don't have item 10, so we're on to item 11, which is the date of the next meeting. And the next meeting will be on the 23rd of February at 2 p.m. So this is our last meeting of this calendar year. So I hope everybody has a nice Christmas and New Year and stay safe. And we'll see you all in 2022, I guess. Oh, George, I see you've got your hand up. Sorry, have you got one last?
Yeah, sorry. To delay folks' departures. Very quickly, Julie, Vivian dropped me an email. I don't think she could get on when we were talking about it, to say that she's been working with Public Health Scotland on the needs assessment for the strategic plan, and she got a whole load of information from them last week, which she is working through. There we go.
Brilliant. Great minds. Thanks very much. That's brilliant.
Timely update, isn't it?
Thanks.
And
it was just to clarify if we will be sent out an invite for special IGB in January. That'll be before the next scheduled meeting. Is that right?
Of course it is. You're quite right.
Yes.
It's still after Christmas and New Year, but yes, you're quite right for reminding us on that, and we'd agree that we would take that as a special IGB. So assume we'll receive a diary notification on that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, everybody.
Bye.
Happy solstice,
Bye,
everyone,
everyone.
when it
Merry
comes.
Christmas.
Bye.
Yep. Christmas when it
Thanks,
comes.
Chair. Thanks all.
You.
Bye.
Christmas.
Thanks, bye.
Have a good Christmas.